Hello, everyone, and welcome to this practice webinar series webinar. I'm joined today. My name is Joel. Sorry for that, Joel. I'm the Liscam Practice Chief Solution Architect, and I'm joined today by my very good friend, Lalit Bamare. Lalit, are you here?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. So, guys, thank you very much for joining us today. The topic of today's session is the State of Testing Report for 2017. And we're going to be talking about it, about the findings that we're seeing, about the stuff that we have been finding for the last couple of years, explain a little bit about it, and again, just going over what we have been seeing lately. So let's get started. First of all, what do we want to do today? Wait, let me make sure that I can work the controls here. There we go. So what we want to do today is basically start with a short introduction about ourselves so that you know who's talking here. Then very quickly, we will move over to explain a little bit about the state of testing survey and the report about the project that we have been running for the last 4/5 years in the system. And very quickly, we will get to the interesting part of the session where we will go over some of the points, some of the findings that we saw this year on the survey. And towards the end, we'll go over your own questions, stuff that you might want to go over and ask and stuff like that. Do remember, we are working with the Zoom interface, which means that you have a Q&A section and you can ask us any questions you like. Most probably, we won't get to them during the session, but at the end, we will have time in order to go over the questions that you are going to be having. So let's get started. First of all, who are we? Where are we taking your time and why maybe you should listen to us? So my name is Joel. That's an old picture of me when I used to be a little bit younger. I've been a tester for the last 20 years, more or less. And again, I started as a tester, as an accidental tester maybe, and I've been managing teams and I've been blogging quite a little bit, speaking on some sessions, some conferences. And I'm also the main author of a blog called the QA Intelligence blog by Practitest, as well as the co-founder, as you will see, of this state of testing project together with Lalit. And again, there are a couple of other projects that I'm also working around, and I'll mention some of them a little bit later on. I work for a company called Practitest, and I will plug them a little bit because they're actually helping us make this a reality, both the project as well as this session. I'm the Chief Solution Architect at Practitest, and I'm also functioning as the QA manager or the lead tester within the team. And I will speak a little bit about practice later, but let's actually jump over and talk about Lalit. Lalit, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, everybody. I'm Lalit. I'm currently working with Zing AZ as a senior test engineer in Germany. If you are already knowing Tita Testers magazine, I'm its co-founder and chief editor, and I'm also looking after other gigs like tv4testers.com, Technotalks with Lalit Show. In my free time, I teach BBST foundation classes with Association of Software Testing and sometimes with Altum Romania. And I regularly assist James Bach in his rapid software testing online class. And I also regularly show up at local meetups, testing conferences. Usually I conduct exploratory testing public workshops. So that's pretty much about me.
Okay, guys, Lalit, for those of you who are not aware of, he has been the moving force behind Tea Time with Testers, and that's very, very amazing for all of us in the community to see his big work, and he works with a little bit about Tea Time with Testers. First of all, again, a little bit about Practitest, the company who's sponsoring us, at least this series today. Practitest is a pretty cool QA management system. If you don't have a QA management system right now, or you're tired of your old management system, go ahead and check it out. We have a pretty nice 2-week trial for the system. It's pretty intuitive and pretty nice to use and work with. On the other hand, you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of stuff that you can do with the system. Integrates with most other bug trackers, or if you have any automation. And one of the teams that I'm actually in charge of is the support team, and we do have the best support in the system, and I do dare you to go ahead and check it out. But enough about plugins, companies. Let's actually start talking about other stuff. And Lip, do you want to talk a little bit about Tea Time with Testers?
Yeah, I mean, we are one of the largest circulated English language software testing magazine, publishing and backing testers up since 2011, I guess, and we are pretty much spread over 100 countries in the world. Um, I believe anybody who is very active in testing community or internet knows about the magazine, and a lot of inspiring minds, great minds have been contributing to the software testing magazine here. Feel free to read it and also contribute.
Guys, and I think that this is a very important point. And again, sometimes I get to contribute to the magazine, but it's not only for that. Lalit is able month after month after month to provide a great magazine full of very, very interesting and, well, actually stuff that you can learn about testing. And he has names, the biggest names in the industry are going to be speaking in there and writing in there. But something that I really, really like about his magazine is the fact that there's also a lot of new people writing there. So even if you don't have experience, I'm sure that Lalit will help you out. And it's a very nice opportunity in order to participate in the community. And we will be talking about that as part of the findings. But one of the things that are changing in the testing community is that we're really becoming global. We're really becoming online. And one of the reasons is because people like Lalit that actually help us bridge the gaps, the geographical gaps, maybe the language barriers that we have between the people all over the world. And Lalit, you actually do a great job in there. And again, you know it because I tell it quite a lot, but it's a great, great thing that you're doing over there.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Guys, another project, if we're talking about testing communities, I'm just going to put it in here. I'm going to remind it afterwards. It's a little bit related to the, more to the QA blog than to the state of testing, but it's a project that I'm working on right now. It's called the Online Test Conf. The Online Test Conf, it's, as the name says, it's an 100% online testing conference instead of the other conferences that they're also pretty good, where you can go ahead and even attend remotely. This one is 100% online, which means that even if you're outside, there are many, many tools from your companies, from your house, in your pajamas, whatever you're going to be doing. It's a very good way of actually participating with the online testing community. It's free to attend. The next one is going to be on June 13th and 14th. The call for presentation is already done. We're going to be actually publishing the presenter shortly, but you can sign up. And it's free to attend. It's a pretty, pretty cool conference. We had another one. The last one we had, the first one was in November. And you can also see on onlinetestconf.com the presentations if you want to take a look into the last presentations. Okay. Now, enough about advertisements and about ourselves and even about plugin stuff. Let's actually start to talk about the real reason we're here. And that is the State of Testing conference. Okay, see here. Okay, people are already talking on the chat. Cool, guys, remember Q&A, it's also in there. So in any case, the State of Testing project. I just want to check a raise of hands. How many people in the sessions, and raise your hands using your Zoom client. How many of you are actually aware of the State of Testing project? How many of you have actually read the reports? If you can raise your hands right now, very quickly. Okay, people are raising hands. That's great. Cool. So we have a number of people who actually are aware of the state of testing, but let's explain for everyone actually in the session, what is the state of testing? So first of all, let's actually talk about why do we call it the state of testing, or where does the name come from? For those of us who are not American, we might not be aware of this, but there is something in the US called the State of the Union Address. And the State of the Union Address, if you see it here, is when the president, in this case, the old president, Obama, once a year, by law, he needs to go in front of both houses of Congress and the Senate and give a speech that explains what is the current state of the Union, in this case of the United States, and explain what has happened in the last year, explain what are his goals for the next year, and basically give a pretty good view of what's going on in there. Okay, so that's where the state of, in this case, testing comes into us, but we're actually stealing that or borrowing that from the State of the Union Address that it's been done by the President of the United States every single year for, I don't really know how many hundreds of years up to now. Now, the history behind the state of testing, actually, it started back on 2013. I remember that I was working on a blog post and I wanted to get some hard data, some numbers, some statistics there's a question here. What is it in the US, the state of? In the US, if you're talking about politics, this question that someone asked, it is called the State of the Union, okay? And the union being as the Union of States, I think it used to be called back in the day. So back, someone asked your question, so cool. In any case, it started back in 2013 when I basically couldn't find any good data. And being friends with Lalit, then I went over and said, hey, Lalit, you actually have a magazine. I guess that you have a lot of information about what's going on over there. And he came back to me and said that, well, actually, there wasn't. There wasn't one source of unbiased information that could actually tell us what was going on, not in one place, not in one company, maybe not in one country, but all over the testing community, and give us a good view of what was going in there. So we sat around, and first of all, we were perplexed about that. Meaning, how come there's not? Especially if we were aware, both of us, about the state of Agile, which has been a project by a company called Version 1, that they do it once a year, even today. And we said, hey, why not actually do it ourselves? And that's why on 2013, then we actually went over and ran our first state of testing survey. We basically run a survey with questions, and once we have those questions, then we analyze them, we review them, and we create a report. And so we had the first report. The survey was run on 2013. We got 630 responses or respondents over there. Then on March 2015, notice that there was no 2014 because we did a little correction on date. So on March 2015, we run the one for 2015 with 865 respondents. On 2016, we got about a little bit over 1,000 response. And we keep those surveys handy. You can go to qablog.practice.com, state of testing, and you will be able to download all of those reports. Obviously, free to download, free to share, do whatever you want to do with them. We actually do it for the community. And we did the last one that was released to the public. The survey ran on December and January, and we released that report a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, maybe even a month ago. Lalit, do you remember those days? Something to add that I forgot?
Not really. You covered pretty much. I remember initially it was quite an interesting initiative that we struggled for the information, and personally, whatever I found it more of a biased stuff, and it wasn't really giving real picture and the answers that you're trying to looking for. And I believe this is more of a community project. We are just the face of it, and I would really give credit to entire community for making it count and helping us reach up to the 4th year of the survey now.
Exactly. And this actually brings us to what makes the state of testing different. And I mean different because there are a number of additional, let's say, reports or surveys, or people actually coming up with other ideas after us. And again, one person once told me that if they copy you, don't get offended. That means that you're doing something right. So apparently we're the first state of testing, and now there's state of test automation, state of test this and test that. But what actually makes us different is, even though we do have sponsorship, and again, I am able to get practice to actually pay for that. And there's a little bit of money that goes into SurveyMonkey and the graphs and the arts and stuff like that. But it really has no agenda, and you can actually see it on the survey itself, on the replies themselves. We are 100% open to suggestions. So much so that both myself and Lead, we agreed that for every edition of the survey, we would have an external review committee, and we try to modify it a little bit each year so that we get new feedback and new ideas and new people who are reviewing the survey and making sure that it's up to date and unbiased. We also get a lot of help from the community in publishing the survey, meaning we proactively go and ask people to spread the word, to make sure that they help us have as many testers worldwide answering the survey. Because obviously, if we're only going to be working on one vertical, or we're only going to be working on one country, or we're only going to be working on a specific part of the community, then the survey won't represent all the community, and that would basically miss the mark. We're trying to do it as open as we can. And one of the things that we said from day one, we knew that the first report would be interesting in itself because it would have good data, but we realize, and we do it every year, what's really interesting are the trends. It's not only about seeing a snapshot, but it's about understanding the path. And the reason for that is because history teaches the future. And by understanding the stuff that has been changing in the last year, 2 years, 3 years, us as testers can actually understand where is our community, where is our profession actually heading. Obviously not in the next 20 years, but surely in the next 5 years, and definitely in the next year or 2 or 3. Okay, so that's what makes it different. We run it year after year, and we try to keep as much as we can the same questions, maybe with a little bit of changes so that they are still relevant, but they allow us to give very, very good trends over that. Lalit, anything else? Something I miss here before we actually start going over the interesting stuff?
Not really. Maybe we should hurry and move on to the.
Yeah, I'm wasting too much time here, so sorry for that. Any case, so let's actually go over the interesting stuff. And the first thing that I believe it's important if we're going to go over that is to understand who answered our survey or who provided us with our data. So if you remember, the last year we had about a little bit over 1,000 respondents. This year we got over 1,600 respondents. Okay, so we got more than 50% more than the previous year. We also increased the number of countries. We are right now at around 75, 76 countries who have been answering. And if we look into the distribution, then it's still not perfect. I would like it to be even more distributed, even more homogenic, but it's mostly, if we're looking into it, Europe and Russia. Then we see a lot of representations from India, from North America, from Asia, and then the rest of the world goes into that. Another nice thing that we're seeing is that there is a representation of the population. So we do have quite a lot of testers who have been testing over 2 years, over 5 years, over 10 years. And again, something that it's also nicer as we have more and more numbers is that we also see a distribution where almost half of the people are either testers or test analysts, the people who are actually doing the job. And then we see, again, test leads, automation engineers, and other people who are there. So as much as we can, and this is improving year over year, we have a more distributed representation of the world. I do know, again, it's not perfect. Obviously, it does reflect people who are, let's say, internet driven, or people who are close to the internet, because most of our publicity, most of the people who are actually talking about us, and even the media, we run it on web media. So it needs to be people who are already hooked to the net. But I guess that is most of us today, okay? So hopefully that will continue to increase. This is just to give you an idea, let's say, of the demographics that we had in here. But once we have that covered, let's actually start talking about the stuff that is more interesting. One of the first questions that we ask, and for me it's a very interesting one, is to ask people what was the path that led them to become a tester. And for me it's a very important question, because I started testing about 20 years ago, and I definitely got into testing by accident. I was at the right place at the right time, and someone was looking for a tester, and I was looking for a job, and I started that without even knowing what test meant, okay? And if you look into the results that we had 4 years ago, there was a bigger number, or a bigger percentage of people who got into testing by accident than those who actually wanted to become testers, okay? So we're seeing that number increase. Lalit, what do you actually see behind these numbers in here?
Well, I'm more particularly delighted that apart from being testers, being accidental in nature, recently for this survey, we identified that there are people who are also making well-informed decision to join testing. I also got to speak with some other colleagues from different locations about the survey findings, and I see that this thing is really indeed positive thing. More or less people are finding testing maybe interesting. They're understanding the value and the fun behind it, and they are taking the decision to join from different disciplines. That's very positive.
Definitely. And I think that another thing that we're seeing here, and if you notice, it's about 21% of people who actually move into testing from another job in the company. So it's not people who got into it by accident without knowing, or people who studied to be that. But and that is a number that I look into the other surveys, and it was more or less the same. where people do realize that testing is a cool thing to do and they move into it. And I've seen, obviously, people who were on the business side and move into testing. I've seen quite a lot of people who were actually doing some sort of technical job like customer support and moving to testing. But surprisingly enough, and at least to me, it was that I'm seeing not one, not two, but tens of people who actually said, I started as a programmer, as a developer, and I moved into testing because I liked it more. Okay, so it's basically breaking the stigma that, yeah, obviously testing is not as good as development. Guys, we're actually people who are swimming into our direction and say that they prefer to do what we do. And I think that that should be something noted, and people should actually understand that that is also something that it's happening. And it's cool to realize that as well. Okay. Now, um, there's also someone here who wanted to do an experiment. He said that if we can do a quick survey here, he also got into testing by accident. So I'm willing to do it. Guys, I'm going to lower the hands of everyone. If you want to raise your hands if you joined the testing world by accident. Those of you who are here, those who actually didn't know what testing was and realized all of a sudden that you became testers by accident. We're going to give another minute to vote. Wow, guys, you're actually pulling it up. It's about a third of the people in the session who actually got into testing by accident. So we're keeping with the numbers. Okay, so a third of us also in here, maybe more, got into testing by accident. So Enrico, thanks for suggesting that. Let's actually move over. Now, if we moved into testing by accident, the next question that we always like asking is, how do you learn about testing? Okay, it used to be two questions. I tell you in previous surveys, the survey actually, this edition of the survey, we unified it. And we asked people, how did you learn testing and how do you keep up to speed with testing? And at least from my side, you know what, let's actually, Lalit, I'm going to let you talk before because I usually talk before. So go ahead, tell us what you see here.
That's totally fine. Well, I'm not surprised by this thing. So particularly when I started my own learning, I was finding resources or internet. I joined community forums, and one thing kept leading to the other one. And I personally feel all of these resources are extremely useful, and it represents our very versatile and very active community in general. Particularly testing books that are there, they are definitely good. I personally admire work by James Buck, Jerry Van Buck. Other new cool things are also coming up. Peer mentoring is also have been helping people a lot. If you know weekend testing format, it's kind of one of the peer mentoring form, I would say. I think there is another specific mentions for the form. Yeah, so 4% of the testers are already learning testing through weekend testing and other online forums, and more of such platforms are booming up, and there are lots of interesting opportunities for people to learn without having to pay really a lot of money. All that matters is your passion and your commitment for learning.
And I think that's a very, very good point. And again, personally, I know that there are great books. I'm a very lazy reader, so I usually, for me, it's more online communities, forums, podcast. Guys, there are incredibly good podcasts out there, and you will have my address at the end of the session. If you want to get some good testing podcasts, let me know. There's one by Jay Larson, Matt Hauser, and a bunch of other people in there. There are other podcasts in there that I'll be more than happy to send so that you can review them. Are great. But there are two things that I'd like to point in here. One of them was something that I remember I think that this was the first or the second survey that we were running. And Jerry Weinberg actually proposed that we add this session in here, that we learn testing from other fields, for example, from psychology, from writing, from teaching, from horseback riding. It doesn't really matter, that we learn stuff that we can apply to testing from other stuff that we might already be doing outside. And for me, it was an eye-opener because I was doing it without even noticing. I have been on the Scouts, and I have been on, again, all sorts of nature stuff for quite a while. And all of a sudden I realized that I used part of what I learned in there in my testing experience. And I also remember that there was another section in here that it was, I think it was I learned from on-the-job training. And I remember someone actually put in a comment that made us take it out immediately. And it was that if you don't learn on your job every single day, then just quit and do another job. So obviously we testers learn from our mistakes and from whatever we do every single day. That's important. But I think that it's also important to notice that we need to go ahead and review other sources of information. Now, do notice that many people here, or the numbers here, do not up to 100. Obviously, it's more than 100, and that's obvious because people can actually learn from multiple places at the same time. Okay, so that's a comment throughout the whole system. You will be able to see it everywhere in there. Okay, so moving forwards, after we realize that we learn from multiple sources of knowledge, if we want, then the next point actually becomes on which are the tasks of the tester. And we specifically went and asked what other tasks, what non-specifically testing tasks do you do as a tester? And we realized that most of us, if many of us, obviously, if not most of us, are multitaskers by nature. And for me, it was also another understanding, another eye-opening moment here, where I realized that it is because we actually, in order to be a good tester, there's no way around it. You need to have a very deep understanding of the system to know every single feature very, very deeply, technology and everything very deeply. But on the other hand, you also need to have a very wide understanding of the system. And this is in contrast to other tasks like programmers or even product owners who might focus on a specific place. Most testers need to focus on I'm not going to say everything, but maybe a lot. And this allows us to participate in a very varied number of value-adding tasks for our projects. Okay, so for me, it's something, and I want to emphasize the value-adding tasks, because I remember once talking to a tester who was saying, hey, so all of a sudden people are asking me to do all sorts of non-testing tasks and I'm wasting my time on them. And guys, handling documentation or managing testing environments or working on customer support and training, these are incredible, valuable tasks that we're doing for our organizations. And we should actually understand that it's very good for us to do it because it helps us to learn more and it helps us to test better at the end of the day. Lalit, your take.
Well, I will be very, very honest with you. After reading about customer support and training thing, finding about this thing from our survey itself, I did an experiment and I extended my work by going with our user care team. I sat with them and I asked them to explain me the whole thing they're doing, how they're doing, what are the typical challenges facing. And for the first time, I realized how important it is and how beneficial it is for me to understand as a tester those things. And if I start paying more attention to those details, what great value it can add to my own work. I'm sure that all other these multitasking activities are definitely adding value to our profile and make us more productive than a typical traditional tester, I would say.
Yeah, so it's a very good point. If you're not doing these things, maybe you should actually go ahead and try to do those things. Okay, look for some of them that you might be able to do, not only because you will be adding value. I think that you will be, as Lid said, you will be adding experience, and experience is a very important part of your virtual toolbox as a tester. How do you know what to test? Well, from conversations that you had with customers. Or how do you know what's important or all the features? Based on whatever you're going to be doing in there. Okay, there's some stuff in here. I'm not going to start going over all the Q&A. We may actually go over them a little bit later on as well. Okay, let's actually move forward. And if we're talking about the stuff that it's happening today around testing, let's actually talk about stuff that is happening around testing or in our environment. And I think that no one can deny that Agile is becoming even stronger than before, and we have the numbers for that. If you notice, last year we had about 82% people saying that they work, at least in some of their projects, on an Agile or Agile-like approach. This year it already jumped to 87%, and again, guys, remember, these are already very, very big numbers. What even provides more feedback is if we see the decline in waterfall. Okay, if waterfall used to be 2 years ago 32%, now it's below 40%. It's all the time is going down and down. And remember, we might be talking about legacy projects that continue working waterfall. What I'm seeing right now is that most, if not all, the new projects actually start working more agile or agile-like. And that is a trend that it's here, and it's here to stay. Now, another thing that we added a couple of years ago, and it was when it was just beginning, is to ask about DevOps. Okay, and for those of you who do not know that, DevOps, basically it's a combination of development and operations, which means that the development team is closer to the field and to the release. And we're blurring the lines between the people who are actually managing the development and people who are managing the servers outside. And we're seeing that is, again, increasing. It might not be booming. It might not be 50% yet. But notice that from 14%, it jumped to 23%. It kept growing to 26% right now. And I do believe that that is going to be the future, meaning as more and more products are going to become SaaS products, and as more and more teams are going to be working, development teams are going to be working on what's going on outside, then that basically means that teams are going to be moving into DevOps. Now, Lalit, I have a question for you. What does that mean to us as testers? Meaning, how do we need to adapt or perish, basically?
Well, it's a very broad question, and I would say, in a standard answer of a typical tester, that it depends. But I think I still remember the comment made by Jay. If you remember, we did the first webinar with him. It is very important for all of us to understand when we say we are doing Agile or we are doing DevOps or we are doing CICD, we must understand whether we are doing it in real sense as per definitions, or we are doing it just in order to fit into the worldly standard. However, as a tester, I think it is very important for tester in different contexts to understand his own role in that particular context and to be able to deliver his best. So for example, in DevOps, I think your collaboration and communication with almost everybody in team, be it operations or your developer team or user care, the more you collaborate, the better you can perform as a tester. Of course, you need to be more inclined towards technical aspects of your testing, but that doesn't add any harm. I would say it always helps you. Not knowing is still fine, but if you know, I'm sure it is definitely going to help you. um, Lots of skill that are required are very much context specific. Even waterfall is still important, and sometimes doing a checklist based testing is still important under certain context. So I would say that a tester needs to be really aware of his role in the project and the context he's working into, and from there he needs to find out what is the best way for him to go ahead.
I think that you cover many interesting points. I personally believe that the point where you were saying about technical that doesn't harm, I think that up to now it was something that would actually help your career be better.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that at least for organizations who are going to be moving into DevOps, technical knowledge, technical understanding, not necessarily programming, by the way, will become a must-have, because
Definitely.
one of the things that we're seeing is that if you're working DevOps, you're working on a very fast environment. You're working on the production servers. Knowing stuff like Azure or Amazon becomes second nature. There's no way about it. And you will need to become more technically enabled. Now, guys, this is not a bad thing, and you can do it quite easily. And there's a lot of misconception, especially around, let's say, old testers like myself, where we were afraid of just getting into code or getting into more technological aspects. And at least from experience, like I said, that it's not trivial, but it's easier than it looks if you start actually by doing it. And as we mentioned before, there are plenty of free, open sources of information for that. Okay, and you should go ahead and do it. Having said that, if you don't want to be technical, then you can still continue working. A misconception is that you need to be technical in order to work agile. For me, that's a very big misconception. There are a lot of things that you could actually provide value as a tester to an agile team, and still not be technical enough. Sometimes you just need to know how to ask the real questions. Sometimes you need to be more the customer advocate. But do remember, when you're working on an agile team, especially on a functional team for an agile project, then you will be wearing multiple hats. And if you think that you can stick and be only a tester, quote unquote, and do only testing, quote unquote, then your placement in an agile team will actually have less value, and you might not find yourself on an agile team. Okay. Now, another couple of things that I do believe that are important, and again, that's the adoption of TDD or BDD. I personally see more BDD outside, but there's also something that if you're not aware of BDD, TDD, DevOps, stuff like that, go ahead and look it up. It's really, really important, and it's going to be part of our future. Okay, guys, I also see some questions that are being asked. We're going to get to them a little bit later on the session. Okay. Now, Lalit, you actually drew a couple of names over there that do not appear on the previous slides, appear here. And it's about CI and CD. Okay, and this is a question that we added this year.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who do not know, CI means continuous integration. CD, it's an additional iteration of CI, maybe a forward iteration of CI called continuous delivery. What do you think about what we find and what that means for us?
Well, particularly for this thing, I was having the similar discussion with my dev colleagues, and my general opinion is that not everybody is doing CI/CD in a true sense. People you typically think that doing their deployments through Jenkins pipelines is CI/CD, but it's really not that. So I would say, even if somebody is saying they're doing CI/CD, then I would tie this thing back to testers' technical skills and also the multitasking ability. So in order to be a successful tester in such context, I think you need to be really an expert with the monitoring, reading the logs, trying to understand what the problems are coming from. Sometimes some problems are not really easy to reproduce with your own tests, and it's only possible to identify them through live production system by some very edge cases or mix and match of things with particular use cases on production, and you can do some sort of reverse engineering from there and identify more scenarios for your testing there. So for CI/CD, I would say it's definitely a future if you're into DevOps and continuous deployment platform. And the role of a tester there is definitely very interesting, and it is definitely more of a multitasking thing. Not that doesn't mean doing everything at a time at the same time, but being able to do multiple things uh, when context demands you to do so.
I can actually sign most of the words that you said in there. The only thing that I was missing was maybe an explanation of what CI and CD actually mean, especially because what you say is correct. A lot of people say, yes, we're doing CI, and they think that they're doing CI, as you said, because they have Jenkins and people commit. Maybe they have a little bit of unit testing that they're running in there.
Mm-hmm.
But guys, that is not CI. CI means continuous integration. Continuous integration means that the code is being integrated every time, all the time, immediately after you did the changes. So every developer will go, and whenever he commits the code or pushes the code, it will go into a system. It might be Jenkins, it might be Star Team. There are plenty of, again, other systems that are not necessarily Jenkins that will build the code, and immediately it will run a set of tests, not only unit tests, it needs to be a little bit of integration test, a little bit of functional test. And the most important part of CI is the realization that if those tests do not pass, that developer stops what he's doing or she's doing and fixes that bug that they just added. Because the idea of CI means that the code actually integrates and the tests pass all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way to make sure that, again, you're running CI, and when you main integrate it, it means that it's working. And I think that goes to what you're saying, Lalit. A lot of people say, you know what, some of the unit tests are failing, but I'll look into that later. That's it, you're not doing CI. You might be doing continuous Jenkins, but you're not doing continuous integration. By the way, continuous delivery, for me, when I saw that before, it was a little bit scary. Scary because it means that you put the code and you send it to production directly. And in reality, it's not that big. Again, it still goes through gate, it still goes through environments, but it basically means that if you did a change, it will go through a number of test cases, through a number of gates, and then it will go live to production very, very quickly. And it's as I said, it's agile on steroids. It's the realization that you need to work iteratively, small chunks, and release as quickly as you can. And for SaaS companies, for companies who are working on specific systems, then it's becoming more and more common. We see it quite a lot in practice. We work on a combination between CI and CD. Once you actually manage to have your process going, it's pretty cool. Having said that, guys, notice there are plenty of projects who are not doing CI and CD, and it might be for a reason. Okay, it might be for a reason, and you will be. We do recommend that you go ahead and read about it because it's becoming more and more common, and you should know what's actually going on there. But one of the additional things that I mentioned, and that actually it's very important, not because I mentioned it, but it's the fact that if the tests do not pass, if you do not have a testing framework, a testing net to verify that the integration actually was successful, it's not only about compiling the code, it's about making sure that the tests pass, and that is still the job of the tester. Defining what is the test suite that needs to pass, which are the test cases that need to be run, many times which are the test cases that will be written. That is still the job of the tester, and that actually makes our part in CI and CD even more important than they were before, because we will need to define those test cases. Okay, and for me, it's a cardinal part of CI and CD. Lalit, what did I miss?
Yes, another important aspect I would say here is that once testers are conditioned to work in CI/CD environment, I think they get lots of opportunity for doing meaningful exploratory testing, to think ahead of time and explore the integration areas more and keep on adding more tests. And I think that's where they can add more value. I think there is also a misconception that with CI/CD testers are no longer needed in team. Every just automated state can replace them. But I think a good tester with good technical skills, of course, and extraordinary exploratory testing skills can be a king of CI/CD team.
Totally agree. Okay, they're telling me that we're starting to run short on time, so let's move. It's important to go over everything. Another question that we ask, and again, this is a new one, but it's an important one, is we ask people what are the areas that are going to be hot and that we need to go ahead and learn and develop ourselves personally in the future. And for me, this is important because many times people ask me, hey, what should I learn next? And they're talking about technologies or areas of expertise. And we got here all sorts of really cool answers that at least some of them for me were things that I'm aware of, but I didn't think about up front. Where people ask me, what should you learn? So obviously, Internet of Things, it's incredibly important. Big data, it's a big thing. But stuff that I think that it's very interesting is start thinking about neuronal networks or augmented reality. Guys, we saw it with Pokemon Go craziness. It's not coming, it's already here. Wearables, stuff like that, for those of us, or for those of you, or for everyone who actually need to go ahead and think, okay, you have time, you want to continue growing yourself or expanding yourself. Here you have a pretty neat list of stuff that you can go ahead and start learning. Okay, and looks for jobs that interest you, and looks for stuff that actually looks like what you want to do in your next job or in this one. Lalit, anything here?
No, you covered it pretty much. I think I particularly feel very excited about these new things. And the bottom line here, I would say that all these new things, new technological changes coming in, really mean a lot of great, interesting stuff in testers' plate, and a lot more opportunities to really become epicenter of software delivery. So try to learn as much as you can about these technologies, play around with them, try to understand the principles behind them. I'm sure testers are going to be the very important component once again when these things are available with everyone and become integral part of the system of every software delivery.
Definitely. Final question that we want to cover today before we move to the Q&A. We started asking a couple of surveys ago, if you're a hiring manager, what are you actually looking for? And I was very pleased to see this as a manager myself. But Lalit, why don't you take it over?
Definitely. I think this is something that we introduced just a few years back, and I believe the good revolution or evolution in testing community would happen when we fix our hiring processes. I remember the old bad days when hiring was done typically based on those very standard stereotype questions: sanity versus smoke test, how many test cases and all. But the testing world has moved beyond that long ago, and it's very important that testers are accessed in multiple dimensions. As you can see here, I spoke with a bunch of hiring managers, I have interviewed testers as well myself, and there are a lot more things like creative mindset, thinking ability, beyond the box thinking, out of the box thinking, mindset, your attitude, whether you're a team player, particularly in agile context, how much attention to detail you're giving. Your technical skills are definitely getting more importance. Your problem solving ability, your worldview of testing, your own experience of quality, your own definitions of quality, and how you apply your experience from different domains and your experience of testing different softwares to benefit your current software in hand. So it is definitely a skill. It's definitely a profession of multiple skills, and it is not just about technical skills. It is just one aspect of your ability of as a good tester. uh, that's pretty much it, Joel.
Yeah, and again, I want to link it to something that you were saying. I think one or two slides before that testing is also putting more and more efforts and more emphasis into exploratory testing. And exploratory testing actually is a combination of many of these points,
Absolutely.
many of these informal points, from problem solving to motivation to communication skills to creativity. Um, you need all of those skills, especially because you need to have it in there. If you don't have that, then you're going to be looking into your project or into your application under test and not doing anything about it. So I definitely think it should be there. There's always somewhere there that you need to have passion. Someone just said over here in the chat, and that's correct. You need to have motivation. You need to have drive. You need to have that passion. You need to have that will actually make you do it. Okay, because if not, you're not going to be able to do it as a tester. Guys, these obviously there are plenty of additional questions on the survey, but we needed to choose only a part of them in order to cover them in 1 hour. And I do want to open the floor up to Q&A. I already saw a number of questions in here. So I'm going to go over them on the order that they were, or points that were brought over, and go over them. But if you have additional questions, go ahead and use the Q&A. Don't use the webinar chat. We might miss them. Go over the Q&A and put them there. So the first question in here, wait, let's shift him up. Technology problems in here. First question is if we can speak to the fact that many studies say that multitasking is bad and ineffective or not effective. And the person here actually placed a article from Time magazine. And I think that that's a pretty good point, because we're saying that testing, I'm going to take that slide again, back up. Wait for it. Here it is. It's this slide here that we said that not only are testers doing additional tasks, but it's something that is good for you. Having said that, I do realize what this person was saying. And again, let's talk a little bit about multitasking. There's something in multitasking where you need to do multiple things at the same time that might be confusing, and it might actually make you waste a lot of time. And that part is the bad one. If you start your day by handling documentation, then doing requirements gathering, then developing internal tools, and you're basically switching between contexts every half hour, then I do agree that that's a very, very bad thing. Having said that, I do believe that there is a good part or a incredible value that we get from doing these things, from being outside of our realm by collaborating in other aspects, as Lalit said, with support or stuff like that, that provides a lot of value. So it becomes, as everything, a kind of a trade-off where you do need to realize that it's bad to do extreme multitasking, especially for your mental health. It creates a lot of stress. On the other hand, if you do it in the correct level and with the correct, let's say, time shifts and shifts in tasks, then it's actually something that's manageable and something that is actually very, very good for you in that sense. Lalit, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, but I would say it also depends on testers' skills of handling the multitasking in a way that it doesn't become a overburden or something that will kill his productivity. I cannot imagine personally being a very productive tester without doing a multitasking. I would say tester needs to know right tools to make his life easy. He needs to know how to make best use of test automation, how to make best use of testing heuristics that are there. Like say focus defocus can definitely help you to deal with your multitasking. There is a way to structure your exploratory testing using session based testing. There are a lot many ways there where you can have a good control over the context switching. Most of the times I find it very useful. You can always apply findings from one context to the other one to find more problems and risks. It's really about how you learn to manage. I think with experience and time it shouldn't be a big problem.
Definitely. Um, Now, if you're already talking, then I'm going to throw out the next question in line. There's someone here who's asking between DevOps and Agile, which one is best for the future? And that is a trick question, so I'm going to just let you answer it. Lalit?
Yeah, sure. Oh, well, I don't really say, I can't really say which one is best. It again depends on what business nature of your company is, what other members of your teams are more comfortable with. I would say DevOps as more of or less of as a extension of agile principle. It's just one way of following your agile principles in a team with some different skill sets and different philosophy. Some
Um,
teams find agile more beneficial for their context. Some teams find that DevOps is more faster for them. It really depends on a lot many factors that just one person cannot decide.
um, that's a good point. I'm going to actually answer with something that I remember talking with one of my developers about it. And we are talking about DevOps and Agile, and he was saying, like, why do you need to compare? Agile is an approach to development. If you're going to be working DevOps, chances are you're going to be working Agile. DevOps is a way of managing your development cycle and your releases into production. Um, so these are two separate things, guys. Both of them are applicable. I think that you can do Agile without DevOps. I'm not sure that how can you do DevOps without Agile. I'm sure that someone will figure it out, but I'm not sure how easy it might be. But it's important to have your concepts ready and to understand that people may actually talk about both in the same context, but they're pretty different things. Okay, so especially if your company is working both DevOps and Agile or only DevOps, well, as I said, last one I don't think is very feasible. Go ahead and understand that, and if not, just go ahead and read about it because it's better if you know what you're getting into. So that, as Lalit has been saying quite a lot of people say they're working CICD and they're not doing it because people like to name names. So it's also an important thing to know. And if your company says they're moving DevOps, then go ahead and help them. Okay, help them by actually helping them do the right stuff in there. We're getting towards the end, so let me just see. There's a bunch of questions in here. One second. I'm looking here. There's a person here asking about the DevOps process. Guys, we don't have time to get into that. I might actually talk about it in one of the next practice webinars because it's a good idea. There's someone here who actually has an interesting question. I think that we will need to close with that one. And what this person is saying that, I'm just going to read it out loud. I'm in a small company where there's not enough resources at the same time. What about documentation and requirements gathering? That was supposed to be the role of the BA, right? The business analyst. How can we align our responsibilities together with the responsibilities of the BA, of that business analyst? So Lali, do you want to look into it? Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I think this is where we can again tie back things to multitasking and learning from different disciplines, pairing with people. I would say in this particular context, if it is expected from you to handle the BA role, I would say talk with your users, talk directly, sit with your customer care, identify how they do their things. That can give you more insight into the thing. I and it lot of it also depends on how much agile you are, how much weightage your company gives for documentation and requirement gathering. I think in agile context it is kind of easy and to manage, where you don't waste so much time on documenting things. Uh, but in different contexts, I understand that it can be also very painful.
And definitely, and I think that here there's also something that comes into play. There's a question that we didn't publish in this session, and it's one where we ask what is the most important skill that a tester needs. And for those who haven't seen the report, the most important skill, and it has been in every single report, people have been saying that communication skills are the most important skills. And I think that that is very important for testers. If we do not know how to communicate, not only outwards communication, but inwards communication, if we do not know how to ask good questions, if we do not know how to get information out of situations, out of people, if we do not know how to coordinate correctly by communicating correctly with the BAs, with the rest of the team, then it's going to make it a lot harder. Okay, so it's something you need to do. On the other hand, guys, if there's already a BA person who is gathering those requirements and doing that work, look for other stuff where you can help. Okay, there's quite a lot of things. I'm sure that every organization has quite a lot of things that are not being taken care of, not being handled, some of them in the list in here, some of them outside of the list in here. Go ahead and do them. Okay, I do believe that there's benefit in quite a lot of stuff that people can do in testing, not necessarily out of the list that we could come up with. Okay. There are additional questions here, but I'm not sure that we'll be able to handle them because we do need to cut. What I do want to do, first of all, is to tell you the following. If you do want to learn more about the system, then you can go ahead and download the state of testing from our site. There's also someone here who was saying that the versions, even though they have been translated to German, Spanish, and Portuguese, I have a small budget for that from practice to do it, but because it's a small budget and we don't want to translate to many languages, then we do not translate the whole report, only parts of them. If someone wants to volunteer to translate to another language or to take an existing translation and make it for the whole system, get in touch with us. You will have my email address a little bit later on, and just send me an email and I'll put you in touch with the people who are actually doing that. But do go ahead and download the reports. Obviously, subscribe to the QA blog and get notifications when the next state of testing is coming up. One last thing that I was requested to do again, guys, a reminder about the online test conf coming on June 13th and 14th. To subscribe, just go to onlinetestconf.com and again, sign up and we'll send you more information later on. And last but not least, guys, we do want to thank everyone, obviously, who was here today. Also, everyone who took part on the survey, who helped us with the survey, the review team, the blogs who actually help us to blog and tweet. And again, to everyone over there. These are personal emails. Mine is joel@practice.com. Lalit can be reached at editor@teatimewithtesters.com. And please, if there's any questions that we didn't get into and you'd like to ask us, go ahead and send them to us. If there's anything that you'd like to tell us, please, we're more than happy always to get feedback, and we try to answer every email we get. Lalit, any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, I would be very happy to discuss a couple of things that we couldn't really talk about, like the questions here. I would urge people to reach out to us, and maybe we can do some follow-up article or webinar in future. But we are always there to help in the best of our abilities. And thank you everybody for participating. And I hope you will participate in the survey again. Feel free to share it with your other friends and community members to make it even more useful for future.
Same here from me, guys. Just a couple of additional questions. Some people asked if we're going to be sharing the deck. We are going to be making the presentation public, as well as the recording. We have been recording this session, and will also be available publicly so that you can listen to it, share it, and again, pass the information along. So Lalit, thanks a million for taking the time to join me today. Guys, thank you for being in the session today. And again, hope to talk to you real quick. Bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.